Hi, I'm Pretti-Frontczak, and I wanted to take a minute today and talk a little bit about what we call patterns. And when we look for patterns, we're looking for these reoccurring events or situations or conditions, and they're really critical to making assessment decisions, regardless of the purpose for which we're doing assessment. And all too often, when we rely on a publisher or an author of an assessment to sort of guide us, we might just look at item by item level, and we sort of don't take this minute to step back and say, what do these items together tell me? Or what do items in one area of development have to do with an area that's altogether different? So what's going on in fine motor and in language? Yep, it's a whole child, a whole body. We need to think about the interdependence and the concurrentness with which skills develop and in which children themselves develop and learn. So the favorite pattern that I like to ask teams to look at is that we sometimes call latency or time to task. This is often the underlying issue for a lot of the kids that we serve, especially children who are struggling with regulation, both being able to internally regulate as well as even responding well to our external attempts to help them regulate. So we're going to talk a little bit about the pattern of latency, and there's sort of two sides to this coin, or two sides to the issue of latency. So one side is that kids take too long to respond. And now, as I talk about this, keep in mind that what is too long for me might be too short for someone else. So we always have to temper these conversations around patterns with knowing the child, knowing their sort of inherent temperament and personality, and then also being really aware of our own preferences, our own sort of way of doing things, to where we would go, oh, that's too fast or that's too slow, noticing that that might be really different for others in our environment. So when a child takes too long to do something, it could be something that just is uncomfortable, but it could also be a reality where the bus has come and gone and the kid's still in the block area, right? So that would be taking too long to get things cleaned up, get to your cubby, get your gear, get on the bus. So when kids take too long, we talk about that being a pattern across situations, across environments, across people, across situations. So it's not just when they have to clean up in the blocks and go home, it's they have trouble picking which thing they want to read, or where they want to sit, or what they're going to eat for snack, or any number of things that there's an opportunity to respond. They take a long time. This can also have to do with kids that take a long time to initiate. So they actually are pretty okay with responding if we ask, if we direct, if we present. But this idea of sort of taking charge and initiating and picking on their own, greeting others, asking questions, making a choice, going to play in a certain center, that takes them a really long time to make that sort of time to task action. The flip side of this pattern of latency is kids who have no latency at all. There is no waiting. There is no that took too long. They have an idea, barely even recognize they had an idea. It might have been just a feeling or an emotion or a surge, and they act upon it. So these are kids who really struggle with impulse control, with planning, with really thinking through the consequences for their actions. They may know the rules, they may understand the words coming out of your mouth as you repeat the rules, but in the moment, it's really hard for them to stop, think, and then take an action, to pull from some of my colleagues that work in the world of self-regulation. So this idea that a kid can consciously control their thoughts, their actions, their emotions is sort of beyond their actual capacity. And so when a kid has trouble with impulse control, that they just sort of act without thinking, that might be another way you've thought of it, that's another issue or pattern around latency. So it's unlikely that most developmental checklist or curriculum-based assessments will have an item about latency. But as you look across the child's performance, as you think about their fine motor, what they do with objects, when they write their name, when they open their milk carton, and you think about how the child does in terms of social communication. What do they say to people? What are the length of their utterances? When do they talk? When do they greet? Do they express anticipation? Do they engage in asking a variety of questions, right? So we've got these whole list of items going on here, from writing your name to asking a question. But the pattern that might bring them all together under the same roof is that the child always takes a long time to do it. Whatever the it is, whether it's writing their name or asking a question, takes forever. And then the flip side of that is the kid who has no latency, no impulse control. They just scribble. They just write something and say, all done. They just ask a 90 million questions that are, related or unrelated. It doesn't matter. They're just firing out as fast as they can think the question, they're asking the question. So again, if we look at our assessment data and go, when did I pause? When was I concerned? When was I like, I don't really want to give you credit for this item because you do it too quickly or too slowly, but you do it. That is an issue of a pattern of latency. And when we start looking at our assessment data and we start mining it for these patterns, we can start to figure out why a child is struggling, why development has stalled, and then we can adjust our intervention versus always thinking that we need to teach something louder or even teach something differently. What often needs to be done is that we need to teach a different outcome.